Okay, Hannah, thank you very much. And I'm very pleased to be here on Lockdown University once again. And thank you all for joining me on this sweltering day in London. I hope you're keeping cool. This month, we are marking the 85th anniversary of the Farhud, the 1941 pogrom in Iraq that ended the oldest diaspora. Why is it important to mark this event? Well, first of all, what is the Farhud? The Farhud was a cataclysmic event which broke out on Shavuot on the 1st and 2nd of June 1941. And the word is Arabic for forced dispossession. The Farhud was a massacre. It was on a much, much smaller scale than what was happening in Europe at the same time, but it was unprecedented in the recent history of the Jews of Iraq. Some 179 identified Jews were murdered, but the death toll could have been up to 600, and some say even 1,000. It sounded the death knell for the Iraqi Jewish community, and within 10 years, 90% of Iraqi Jews had fled, and today just 2 Jews live in Iraq. I will argue that the ideological legacy of the Farhud is still with us today. For a start, the barbarity of the Farhud has its echoes in the 7th of October massacre. Shlomo Mansour at 85 was the oldest victim of the 7th of October, and he was a direct link between the Farhud and the Hamas massacre. Mansour was a small child in the Farhud, and he ended his days being abducted from his home in Kibbutz Kisufim. For months, it was thought that he might have survived, but he was actually murdered on the day of the Hamas attack and his body taken hostage into Gaza. And it was only returned in February 2025. His diary was found quite recently by his family and contained recollections of running outside and climbing on the roof of his house after rioters broke in and looted the family's valuables, attacking his parents, excuse me, and killing his dog. I quote, "From the roof, I saw a horrifying sight that I still remember and that causes me nightmares, especially when I'm thinking of the terror organizations ISIS and Hamas, who are our neighbors." Prescient, wasn't it? I heard terrible screams and saw a woman crying her heart out and begging to get her baby back. But they kept playing with the baby like a ball. Then one of the monsters took a knife, skewered the baby, and handed him back to her. Before we examine the causes and consequences of the Farhud, let me take you back 2,600 years. The Jewish community of Iraq is the oldest Jewish diaspora, and it goes back to the Babylonian exile in 586 before the Christian era, when King Nebuchadnezzar took the Jews as captive slaves from Jerusalem. There by the rivers of Babylon, they sat down and wept as they remembered Zion. Only 70 years later, the Persian King Cyrus decreed that the Jews could return to Jerusalem. But life was so good that many decided to stay there, and the community was in continuous residence in the land of the two rivers until about 50 years ago. And this is how Baghdad looked at the turn of the century. You can see these distinctive circular boats that were used to navigate the river. They're called kuffas. And at the bottom there, you can see one of the pontoon bridges built by the British during World War One. And on the left at the bottom, you can see how close the buildings were in Baghdad. And they were actually to save the lives of the Jews as they escaped the rioters by jumping from roof to roof. So this is a map of present-day Iraq. But it was Babylon that shaped Judaism as we practice it today. And the scholars of the pre-Islamic academies of Babylonia wrote the Babylonian Talmud, comprising the Mishnah and Gemara. And Rabbi Hillel was born in Babylon. Here he is on the left. The community had its ups and downs, and the Jews became subjugated dhimmis under Islam. But the Jews outlived the Medes and Persians, the Umayyads, the Abbasids, the Mongols, the Mamluks, the Arabs, and the Ottoman Turks, right up until the British Mandate in 1917, when the modern state of Iraq was created out of 3 Ottoman provinces. It was under the British that the Jews experienced their short golden age. And during the 1920s, the finance minister was a Jew, Sir Sasson Heskel, here on the right. And this picture shows my 2 grandfathers standing at the back with their handlebar moustaches. And they were importing and exporting goods from India and Europe. Jews comprised 1/3 of Baghdad and were the single largest ethnic group. And here is a meeting of the Baghdad Chamber of Commerce in 1938. Of 18 members, 10 were Jews. Jews were also prominent writers, musicians, and singers. However, matters started to deteriorate in the 1930s. The king of Iraq, Faisal, died in 1933. Iraq became nominally independent in 1932. But a massacre of 600 Assyrian Christians in the north of the country did not bode well for the minorities of Iraq. Although Faisal had been a friend of the Jews, he had brought with him a group of fierce nationalists. Sati al-Husri was a Syrian who became Director General of the Ministry of Education in Iraq. From the late 1920s, fascist influence rose in Iraq, as did anti-Semitic sentiment. Nationalist parties were established on the Nazi model, and pro-Nazi paramilitary youth groups, such as the Futuwa. Jewish civil servants were dismissed, although reinstated later. There were quotas on Jews in universities and the professions. Reuben Zaslani was a teacher from Palestine, and he was sent back in the 1930s. He later became the head of Mossad. But while in Iraq, he writes this letter to a Muslim friend in the government, saying that he detected a strong anti-Jewish movement. Even official circles are supporting it, he wrote. With Germany's eye on Iraq's vast oil reserves, the German ambassador Fritz Grobber set up a network of spies and sympathizers in order to forge an anti-British alliance. And by the end of the decade, the Nazis agreed to recognize the Arabs as honorary Aryans. Grobber, who you see on the left, was first appointed as a chargé d'affaires in Baghdad in 1932, and he served for 7 years until September 1939. And his name was actually an anagram of A. Borg, so spelt backwards. Under Grobber, the German legation acquired an Iraqi daily newspapers, Al-Alam al-Jadid, the New World, to spread Nazi propaganda with virulent anti-Semitism. Hitler's book, Mein Kampf, was translated into Arabic and serialized by the newspaper, and other Iraqi dailies published insightful quotations from it. That means full of incitement, not insightful. During his service in Iraq, Grobber attended the Al-Mutana Club, which was the center for Iraqi nationalism. The club appealed to intellectuals, politicians, and army officers. Grobber convinced many Iraqi politicians and journalists that loyalty to Britain would keep Iraq indefinitely under occupation, and that the country's full independence could only be achieved with the victory of the Axis powers. After the war, Grobber was arrested by the Soviets in 1946, and he spent 10 years in prison. And under interrogation, he confirmed Hitler's genocide plan for the Middle Eastern Jews. The next malign actor was the Mufti of Jerusalem, the Palestinian Mufti, Haj Amin al-Husseini. People know about his involvement in stirring up trouble in Palestine. For instance, the riots of 1920, 1921, 1929 Hebron massacre. But fewer know about what he did in Iraq. He was sent into exile there by the British in 1939, together with 400 Syrians and Palestinians. The Mufti spent 2 years attempting to overthrow the pro-British government, inciting the local Muslims against the Jews, who were seen as collaborators with the British. After several failed attempts, the Mufti gave his backing to a pro-Nazi coup led by the nationalist Rashid Ali al-Ghalani and 4 army officers. And you can just make out Rashid Ali wearing the glasses on the screen. It is said that the Mufti and his cohorts had plans to round up and exterminate the Jews of Iraq in concentration camps during the 2 months that the pro-Nazi government was in power. Yunus Bahri played an important part in inciting hatred against the Jews over the radio. Now, he was born in 1904 in Mosul in northern Iraq, and he acquired the nickname Bahri, which means sailor, because he briefly attended a naval academy in Constantinople, today Istanbul. He was a larger-than-life character. Reputedly, he had 15 nationalities, was married 100 times, and had fathered 100 children. Yunus Bahri joined the Arabic program at Radio Berlin in 1939. His morning broadcast always started with the call, Huna Berlin, Hayya al-Arab. This is Berlin, Arab greetings. After the war, he worked for NASA, broadcasting anti-Jewish propaganda. Historians have attributed much blame for the June 1941 events in Baghdad to the Mufti of Jerusalem, but Yunus Bahri may have done more harm than the Mufti in inciting the masses day after day to act against Britain and the Jews. In coffee shops across Iraq, radios were tuned to his broadcasts. The Iraqi fight is a fight for all Mohammedans and thus a holy war of Islam, he broadcast. The pro-Nazi government in Iraq was the only Arab regime to sign a treaty with the Axis powers. It sent an artillery force to attack the Habaniya Air Force Base, where the British Air Force was stationed. But it took just under 2 months for the British to topple the Nazi government, and by the 31st of May, they had put to flight the Mufti and his acolytes. They ended up in Berlin as guests of Hitler. But the damage had been done. Poisonous radio propaganda inflamed the Muslims against the Jews. The British Army reached the gates of Baghdad, but did not enter the city. On the 1st of June 1941, the regent, who represented the pro-British Iraqi royal family, was back in Baghdad. A group of Jews who had been locked in their homes over the past 2 months amid a climate of rising incitement, ventured out in their Shavuot best suits. As they stood at the bridge over the Tigris, the Farhud started. Now, this picture is often used to illustrate the Farhud, but actually it was taken 2 years before the Farhud, and it appeared in a Berlin magazine in 1939. So the Farhud started with a mob of defeated Iraqi soldiers and pro-Nazis, including some police, later joined by Bedouins in search of loot. And they began to attack buses full of Jews, pulling them out of the buses and killing them. The Farhud was premeditated because the paramilitary youth group, the Futuwa, had gone around daubing a red handprint on the Jewish homes. And the riot began in the old Jewish quarter on the right bank of the Tigris. The mob broke into Jewish homes, killing, raping, and mutilating. They looted houses and shops until there was nothing left. Terrified Jews ran across the flat roofs to escape the mob. Why did the British, who were camped outside the city, why did the British not intervene? The staff of the British embassy could hear the screams and gunshots coming from across the river. But the British Army was under orders not to intervene until on the second day, the mob began to attack Muslim quarters. The British ambassador to Iraq, Kinahan Cornwallis, should not escape criticism for the way he responded to the atrocities of the Farhud. Cornwallis had had a long service in Iraq, going back to 1921, when he served as advisor to the Minister of the Interior in the post-Ottoman Iraqi government, completing his service to the government of Iraq as advisor to King Faisal I, who passed away in 1933. Like the German diplomat Grobber, Cornwallis, an old Iraqi hand, was rushed by his government into his post in April 1941 to deal with the Al-Qalani pro-Nazi government. An Iraqi officer called Captain Holt, an aide of Cornwallis, was supposed to tell him about the anti-Semitic violence of the 1st and 2nd of June. Captain Holt apparently refused to wake the ambassador, telling the caller, "The ambassador is aware of the firing and the looting, but he considers the matter an internal Iraqi affair." And despite pleas from the leaders of the Jewish community and the US ambassador, Cornwallis kept the British Army on the other bank of the Tigris River, while the Farhud was taking its toll on the Jewish community. An embassy guest, Somerset the Chair, visited Cornwallis a few days later. And he says in his diary, "The library contained an air conditioning unit. It is impossible to keep a cool head without it," Sir Kinahan Cornwallis said. "He told me that 2,000 people, mostly Jews, were believed to have been killed in the one night's looting, a figure which was subsequently reduced to 700. Cornwallis stands out for inaction when action on his part could have saved many lives. Iraqi-Jewish leaders found his behavior to be deplorable and inexcusable. Ultimately, the British did not want to intervene lest they be seen to be reoccupying the country. Once the orders had been given, however, the riot was put down very quickly by midday on the 2nd of June. By the end of Shavuot 1941, some 179 Jews were known to have been murdered, 600 were injured, 1,500 stores had been destroyed and looted, and about 15% of Jewish families were homeless. No one knows the final death toll. Bodies were thrown into the Tigris, and Jews were poisoned in hospital. Dead bodies were collected and buried in this loaf-shaped mass grave, which actually no longer exists. It was demolished in 1958. The value of property wrecked and looted was put at 750,000 dinars. An investigative committee assigned 75,000 dinars compensation to people who had suffered property damage, but this was only during April and May, nothing during the 1st and the 2nd of June. 8 people, or maybe fewer than that, were executed. Although prosperity did return to the Jews of Iraq in the years immediately following the Farhud, the Jews had received a terrible shock. When Israel was declared in 1948, the Iraqi government began to persecute the Jews of Iraq. The fear returned of a second Farhud breaking out, and this, more than anything else, caused the Jews of Iraq to flee. Most of them, that's about 124,000 out of a community of 135,000, moved to Israel in 1950 and 51. When emigration became legal, on condition the Jews forfeited their Iraqi citizenship, they joined airlifts, which were organized by Israel, and they went there. This laissez-passer shows, however, that it was a de facto expulsion, because the stamp that you see here in Arabic says "one way, no return." You can leave, but you're not allowed to come back. Other Farhuds followed in other Arab countries, resulting in the flight of their Jewish communities. The Farhud destroyed the Jewish delusion that they could live in Arab countries as free and equal citizens with the Muslims. So was the Farhud just another pogrom as broke out sporadically against the Jews? It was something new, a toxic brew of anti-Semitism inspired by Nazism, which was imported into the Arab world from Europe. It is also the result of an exclusivist nationalism that had no place for non-Muslim minorities, and it set off a pattern of dismantlement and dispossession reminiscent of the Nuremberg laws. The Jews also learnt the painful lesson that the Western powers were not ready to protect them. Not only that, but one of the main instigators of the Farhud, the Palestinian Mufti of Jerusalem, Haj Amin al-Husseini, demonstrated that his hatred of Jews was not confined to Palestine. It spilled out beyond Palestine and was targeting the Jews of the Arab world. So the Farhud was the opening salvo, if you like, in this religious war against the Jews, not just Zionists. The Mufti spent the rest of the war in Berlin as Hitler's guest. He was an active collaborator with the Nazis and fully on board with the Nazi plan for a final solution. And his legacy of genocidal anti-Semitism, I believe, is still the core of Palestinianism today. More Jews died than on Kristallnacht, yet the Farhud has not become part of Holocaust memory. However, Holocaust museums are gradually beginning to feature it. Only by commemorating these dark historical events can we light the way to a better future. So I would now like to show you a film which my organization Harif commissioned from Sephardi Voices UK in partnership with the Sephardi Synagogue of Montreal. And this was done for the Farhud's 80th anniversary. The film consists of testimonies from survivors of the Farhud living in the UK and in Canada. And it opens with a remarkable account from a lady called Victoria Nathaniel, whose family actually escaped from Baghdad on the eve of the Farhud, only to find themselves in the company or in the same hotel as the Mufti of Jerusalem, who was also escaping. So over to you, Hannah. Can you show the film? Thank you.
Few days before the Farhud, actually I saw a khamsa, somebody put like their hand with red on our door. And I asked my mother, what is that? So she said, well, maybe somebody just made a mistake or they think that they were Jewish people or something. But they were actually mentioning all the Jewish homes a few days before the Farhud, because they were planning for something like that to happen.
Yeah, all I remember, we left Baghdad a day before the Farhud. We were so scared. We left at night, and a sheikh was with us to protect us. We took the train. The train was full of soldiers. There was no civilian at all. We were the only civilian. And we were all so scared. And before reaching Khanaqin, we saw Rashid Ali and Gilani and Mufti. They were escaping. We saw them in the car. Baba said, "Oh, here they are." I didn't know. So then, once we got to Kermashan, there was only one hotel there. We stayed there, and we saw all three of them there. They were having breakfast and dinner with us in the same area. And after that, we went to Iran.
We had a cook, and my mother sent him to the shops. We didn't know there is anything wrong. To the shops to get something, to buy something. He came home, and he told my mother, "What can I tell you? They are trying the Jewish houses. They break in, they rape the girls, or they kill them, and they take their furniture." And we were in the list, you know. They give our house, our address. So immediately, we didn't have telephone or anything. My father and my mother and we three children, we went to my aunt.
The first day, in the morning, somebody came in the morning, early in the morning. He's the cook of my auntie. Mm. And his face was pale and he was shivering. And he said, "You know, I was at the bus. They stopped the bus and they said, all the Jews get out." So they came to him. He's very fair. He didn't look Jewish. He's very fair. They got him out. He said, "Are you Jewish?" He said, "I'm Christian." Mm-hmm. They let him go. And he was very lucky. He came over to us. We told him, "Stay with us. Stay with us, have a rest." We gave him a drink, something to eat. After some time, he said, "I have to go back to my job. I am the cook."
And unfortunately, on June the 1st, 1941, we suddenly heard people shouting and yelling and outside our houses. We had a tree, nakhla, at the beginning of the house, and I climbed the tree, and so it's about 15 feet high, and I was hiding in between to see what's happening outside. And I saw a lot of men with swords in their hands, with rifles and what kind of things, and they're shouting, "Uqtul al-Yahud, idbah al-Yahud." Kill the Jews, kill the Jews. And I was saying to myself, what the hell did I do at 9 years old that they want to come kill me?
It was time near Shavuot. 7 o'clock in the morning, the milk woman, she used to bring the milk every morning. She came to the back door and she told my mother, "Let everybody stays in today." She said, "Why?" She said, "I don't know, but it's better to stay in. Don't let anybody go out of the house." Half an hour later, she came and she said, "Come with me. All of you, come with me."
My biggest brother was in an area where they came, and he kept his wife and his children in one room, and when they came, he told them the money is there, the clothes are there, but don't touch the. So they said he's a national one, and only stole everything. He did not. They did not leave him a trousers, but they did not kill the children.
Went and sheltered with our next door neighbor, who was my first cousin, and the looters were passing by. Yeah. And he said, "If they turn up and assault my cousins, I'd rather shoot my cousins than lose the honor."
We were still in our pajamas, before breakfast, before anything. We followed her. She took us to her hut, a small room, half the size of this room, mostly bedding. By the time we closed the back door, the front door was broken down. And the mob came in. We didn't see them, luckily. We could hear the noise, the bullets. We closed the door and we sat there. She told us nobody to speak. We could hear bullets. We could hear screaming. We didn't know what was happening. Our parents didn't even, they said to us not to speak, put their fingers on their mouth. We stayed there from 7 o'clock in the morning till 5:30 in the evening. No food, no water, hot. Worst of all, no toilets.
My aunt, they are very rich. They have a very big house. They are in the corner of one street. The other corner, a Muslim solicitor or something like that. But they are in very good terms with him. They sent someone to ask the Muslim solicitor if we can come, and they are not a family of 5. We are about 30 people. They said no problem, come all of it. So we went to this Muslim, and they were, I do still remember the woman asking go and bring yogurt for the children, go and bring coffee, milk, whatever, you know. They were very helpful.
But what I saw is our landlord, who was our next door neighbor, at the time he wore a green hat, let's call it, because he was a Haji. And I saw that he had a chair in front of our house, and when the whole mob came in, they stopped right in front of him, and they were talking to him. But of course I couldn't hear what they said. I only found out later that when they came, they wanted to go into our house. He told them that there was a woman with 9, she's a widow, with 9 children, and she asked for his protection. If they want to go and get them, they have to kill him first. So we were saved by this Muslim Haji. Thank God there were some good people like that. Then they went to our neighbors, and I can hear the screams of women being raped, mutilated.
Apparently there was one army fellow who used to buy, who finished his bullet, used to buy every bullet for 1 dinar. Dinar was a pound then, to kill Jews, if there are any Jews. And he used to say, there were nearly 17 Jewish people in this house. Where are they? Was looking for us. And she said to him, they went in the morning, early morning, they went to the other friend. Her aim was, if we had anything buried or anything hidden, to find out before we would be killed. Because at the end of the evening, at lunchtime, she came, pulled a drawer, and got a saber, a big, long knife, put it in her belt. And my father asked her, Jamila, you will want to sleep in the evening. Where will you put us? He said, we will be digging a big hole. We put you in it and we'll cover you till the morning. And then you come back to the hut. I think my parents understood what's going to happen. By then, we will be killed and we'll be buried in that hole.
We thought, fine, the British are coming. We're going to be all right. I was standing outside my house, and And immediately next to us, my neighbor, there was another school boy friend of mine. And I said, let us go for a walk. At that time, another Jewish fellow student came along, said, don't go out. They've started killing Jews. Right? Now, it so happened that as he walked towards the end of the street, I saw that he was surrounded by other people. Later, I learned that he was murdered. And that was the night when, how can I describe it to you? There was a lot of, sometimes a period of eerily silence, I suppose, when the marauders were surrounding Jewish people. And then there would be a huge hysterical cry, presumably when a crime was committed. And there was a lot of shrieking and screaming that went on right through the night.
Then after what they did to our neighbors, they set the houses on fire. And that went all night. I don't know if they were alive, but all we know, because what they did is if they saw a radio, they took it. If they saw something interesting, they took furniture and things like that, and then they set the house on fire. But again, all night, like you heard people screaming and yelling, crying, and you couldn't do anything. There were some people we saw them jumping from house to house, running away. And we were saved from that whole street. We were the only one who were saved, actually, really.
A friend of my father who was in the army, his name was Qasim. He was looking for my father. He knew about the pogrom. He was looking for my father. He kept on ringing, but of course the phone was taken, was cut. So he came in this fellow's car to look for us. What he found, the house was empty, literally empty. Even the windows were taken out. The doors were taken out. The banisters were taken out. And there were only papers in the house. And our cat, we used to have a cat, she was meowing all the time. And there was no sign of life at all.
I was in my brother's house during the celebration, and I had to go back to home, and my brother advised me not to go in the new street, but I go in the old street called Rashid. All those who went back from the new street called Ghazi Street were killed. They used to stop all the buses and see who is Jew, and they kill him. And I and one of my relatives went by foot all the street, all the street, and we arrived safely.
So we took a carriage, and I sat in my father's lap, and all the time he used to put his hand on my eyes so that I don't see what is in the street, especially Shara al-Rashid. Either blood on the ground or the stores were looted and broken. So there was a sort of a chaos everywhere, and police was here and there. Yeah. So finally we arrived at our home, and first thing, the door was broken. There was they broke the lock of the door and went inside. When we went inside, the house was simply empty. There was nothing. They took all the furniture, all the food. All what is left is some grains of rice on the floor.
So he asked the people, where are these people who lived in this house? He pulled his gun and he said, I will shoot you if you don't tell me. he said to him, I know where they are, and I will take you to them. So he came in these little narrow alleyways, calling Saleh. But this woman, Jamila, told us not to speak and not to make a noise, or that nobody would know that we were there. We didn't answer. Saleh, Saleh, Saleh. At the end he came and he said, Saleh, I am Qasim. So we came out. He took us to this car. We couldn't fit, so many of us. Who do you leave behind? Those are left behind will be killed. In those days, the car used to have a platform. And then you open the door, so they stood on the platform, put their hand round the windows, and we all fitted in.
So my father said, I'm going to bring some food. So where we go, where to sit? We found a newspaper. My mother put it on the floor, and my brother slept on that. And then my father went to bring something. He came back. He brought just a few pieces of cheese, some dates, one pita, and he said, everything is closed. There is nowhere to get things. And he went to the stores to buy some dishes. He could get only one dish and two knives.
Oh my
and
God.
I still keep one of the knives as a souvenir till today.
The next day, my father took us to get the passport renewed, and he took us immediately. After a few days, he took us out. We went to my brother in Iran. I registered in an American school for a year and a half, and then we went to India.
Well, actually, after the Farhud, all the young Jews, almost all of them, became political. There were two movements, political movements. One is the communist and one is Zionist. And many people went to the Zionist movement, and many went to the communist. And you have sometimes in the family, one brother is Zionist, the other is communist. And
I joined the Makhtarat only later when I was 16 years old, because we figured at the time we're not going to have that again happening to us as the Farhud, because if another time is going to happen, we're going to have to be ready, because we were not ready in 1941. We thought everything was good. We are Iraqis, we are citizens. There is a police that will protect us. But that was not so. And so this is really one infamous day that I shall never forget.
You felt you are a second-class citizen. You felt you are Jewish and you are not wanted. You are taken advantage of. My sibling, we all felt the same thing. I mean, it gave us a shock. It gave us an outlook on life that we have to hide. We were not proud to be Jewish.
So there you are. some of those witnesses actually are no longer with us, so this is quite a precious testimony. So if there are any questions, I'd be very happy to answer them. I see there are a few, or perhaps comments. Yeah, Etam says there's a monument, Tefillah, near Tel Aviv, erected in memory of the Jews who perished during the Farhud. Yeah, that is correct. David Garfield asks, was Cornwallis related to the general of American Revolution times? Not that I know of, actually. And Madeline asks, why was the mass grave destroyed in 1958? The government wanted to redevelop the cemetery where the mass grave was located, and they destroyed the mass grave and they opened a new cemetery. And I think the redevelopment plans did not actually materialize. And today that site is a bus garage in Baghdad. Etam asks, any Jews left in Baghdad today? Rita says 3 or 4. Actually, the up-to-date figure is 2 Jews in the whole of Iraq. And Adi had to leave, but thank you very much for your kind words. Shelley asks how many Iraqis were Christian at the time. Well, Iraq was a very mixed country. There were lots of minorities. The Assyrian Christians were one. Of course, there were the Kurds, there were the Turkomans, the Mandeans. And I haven't got the figures for Christians. These were mainly in the north of the country at the time, the Assyrian Christians. And as I told you, they suffered quite a bit in the early 30s. There was a terrible massacre. So yeah, just one minority amongst many. And thank you, Monica, for your kind words. And Sharon points out that the witnesses only survived due to some people's kindness. So sad. Yeah, that's true. I mean, obviously the death toll would have been much greater had honorable and kindly Muslims not saved Jews. And certainly that was the case in my father's family, because my grandparents were able to leave through the front door of their house, and they escaped into the neighbor's house. Now, the neighbor, funnily enough, was a Nazi, but his wife was a real lady. And she said, of course, you can come into the house. I'll make the beds for you. You can stay as long as you like. And they did. And when it was all over, the Nazis saw my grandparents' furniture piled outside on the street so that the looters could carry it all away. And he said to them, put everything back, every last thing. And they did. So that's their story. Many Jews who emigrated after the Farhud returned to Iraq, and the founding of Israel was the main cause of mass emigration. Yeah, that is correct. The lady who was saying that she went to Iraq, sorry, she went to Iran and then to India. That was actually my mother. They stayed in India till the end of the war, but life in India was actually not that wonderful because tension was growing. You know, there was a movement for independence. You know, to end the British rule in India. There was violence and graffiti on the walls. You know, British out. And also it was quite hard to make a living in India. So my mother's family actually moved back to Iraq in 1945. But of course, the conditions did deteriorate again in 1948. And the Jews were not allowed to leave at that point. Zionism became a crime for which you could be arrested or executed. And it was also, by the way, a crime to be a communist. And of course, there are quite a few Jews who became communists. So the situation became untenable until Israel mounted a rescue mission and they organized an airlift. People were actually allowed to leave, but on condition that they renounced their citizenship. And then their property was nationalized. So they did leave with nothing, but at least they managed to leave, and Israel was really the main destination for 90% of the Iraqi Jews. And Carol, thank you. Yes, so the woman who mentioned the cook who arrived at her doorstep, that was my mother. He said he was Christian and survived. Well, no, when she said he was white, she meant white with fear. He was very pale, and he was trembling with fright. So it's not terribly confusing, I hope. Okay, Carol. And could Jews flee to India? Well, those who had passports, like my mother's family, were able to flee to India, but generally, Jews could not really leave. I mean, some did migrate to Palestine, but that was difficult because the British had quotas on immigration. So, most of the Jews were really trapped in Iraq, and it was only, when Israel organized the airlift in 1950-51 that most of them were able to leave. And thank you, Rita. Thank you, Barbara. Today's protesters know nothing of this, and it's easier not to know. Isn't history repeating itself? It's terrible. Lorna says, I wouldn't say that those were the days, would you? So yes, please check out your in-laws and see if they know about it, if they have a story to tell. David Garfield, I have a childhood friend whose parents were Assyrian Christians. He was always quite closed mouth about that. So the Assyrian Christians, in some ways, were, yet another persecuted minority. In other ways, and actually, when most of the Jews left, they had a habit of employing Jewish nannies, but when the Jewish nannies were no longer available, they employed Assyrian Christian nannies. Their food was quite different. Interesting. Thank you, Janice. Thank you, Rhonda. There's a Holocaust Education Week in Toronto full of fabulous guest speakers and lectures. It took a good many years to include the plight of the Iraqi Jews. Yes, it is quite a recent thing, really. Edwin Black, the author, was quite instrumental in getting the Washington Holocaust Museum to feature the Farhud. I think that he was really a pioneer in this, and some of the Holocaust museums have now followed suit. Did my grandparents ever leave? Right at the last minute, actually. They were amongst the Jews who stayed on after the big airlift. They stayed through the 1960s, and they finally left in 1970, I think, when they managed to get a passport. And Joan, I don't know what your message was. Just got as far as Dear Lyn. Okay, how did you get to London? Well, actually, I was born in England. My own parents left in 1950, but instead of going to Israel, they came to London, and there were sort of various reasons for that. So my immediate family was in London, but I still had relatives in Baghdad, among them my grandparents. I don't know if there are any more. I think that might be it.
I think so. Thank you so much.
Well, thank you, Hannah, and thank you for showing the film.
My pleasure. Have a good afternoon and evening to everyone, and thank you, Lyn.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone, for joining me.